Billionaire offers $10 billion to a single father if he marries her, but he says no. The fluorescent lights of the Melbrook Hotel's basement corridor flickered as Ryan Walker pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway, the wheels squeaking in rhythm with his steps. It was 11:47 p.m. and the night shift was in full swing. His blue uniform was pristine despite hours of work, and his yellow gloves were pulled tight as he methodically cleaned each surface with a practiced efficiency that came from 3 years of doing the same route, the same floors, the same rooms. But tonight, something felt different. Ryan paused at the service elevator waiting for it to arrive. In his pocket, his phone buzzed insistently. He pulled off one glove to check the screen, and his heart skipped a beat when he saw the notification from his trading platform. The positions he'd carefully built over the past 6 months were showing green, all of them. But more importantly, there was an email from BlackRock Capital Management. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. He'd taken their proprietary trading evaluation test 3 weeks ago, a grueling assessment that tested not just trading skills, but risk management, emotional control, and strategic thinking. Out of 3,000 applicants, only 15 would be selected to manage actual capital from one of the world's largest investment funds. Congratulations, Mr. Walker, the email began. We are pleased to inform you that you have successfully passed all stages of our evaluation process. You are one of 15 candidates selected from a pool of 3,047 applicants to trade a funded account starting at $100,000, with potential scaling to $2 million based on performance. Ryan read the words 3 times, his breath catching in his throat. This was it. This was the door he'd been knocking on for years, the door that would change everything. The elevator dinged, pulling him back to reality. He pocketed his phone and pushed his cart inside, his mind racing with possibilities. But he couldn't quit his job yet, not until the BlackRock contract was signed and the first payouts confirmed. He'd learned the hard way never to count money before it was actually in his account. The elevator rose to the penthouse floor, where only the most exclusive suites existed. Ryan had special clearance to clean these floors between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., when most guests were either out at events or already asleep. He preferred this shift. Fewer people, less judgment, more time to think. As the doors opened, he nearly collided with a woman rushing into the elevator. She was stunning, blonde hair falling in perfect waves past her shoulders, blue eyes that seemed to hold entire oceans of emotion, wearing a royal blue blazer over denim shorts that somehow looked both casual and impossibly elegant. Her tanned skin glowed under the hallway lights, and there was something about her that commanded attention without demanding it. "I'm so sorry," she said breathlessly, stepping back. Her voice was refined, but carried an edge of desperation. "I wasn't looking where I was going." "No harm done," Ryan replied, holding the elevator door. He recognized her immediately. Celeste Davenport, the owner of the entire Melbrook hotel chain. He'd seen her in the building a handful of times over the years, always surrounded by assistants and lawyers, always untouchable. But tonight, she was alone, and she looked lost. "Thank you," she said, stepping back into the hallway. But she didn't move away. Instead, she stood there looking at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You're Ryan Walker, aren't you? You work the night shift?" He was surprised she knew his name. "Yes, ma'am. Is there something I can help you with?" Celeste laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "That's a loaded question." She glanced down the empty hallway, then back at him. "Do you have a few minutes? I know this is irregular, but I need to talk to someone. Someone who doesn't have an agenda." Every professional instinct told Ryan to politely decline. This was his boss, well, the owner of the company that employed him. Nothing good could come from a late-night conversation in an empty penthouse hallway. But something in her eyes stopped him. Behind the designer clothes and perfect makeup was a person who looked genuinely desperate. "I have my rounds to finish," he said carefully, "but I can spare a few minutes." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you. Really. Come with me?" She led him down the hall to the presidential suite, a sprawling apartment that took up half the floor. The door was already open, and inside, the space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The furniture was modern but comfortable, all clean lines and expensive fabrics. Celeste walked to the bar and poured herself a glass of whiskey, her hands shaking slightly. "Can I offer you something?" "I'm on the clock," Ryan said, remaining near the door. "But thank you." She nodded, taking a long drink before setting the glass down. "Right. Of course." She turned to face him, and in the soft lighting of the suite, he could see that she'd been crying. I'm going to ask you something completely insane. And before you answer, I want you to know that I'm not drunk, I'm not crazy, and I'm not joking. Ryan's hand moved instinctively to his cart, ready to excuse himself. Miss Davenport, Celeste, please. She took a breath. My father died 6 months ago. Before he died, he made a provision in his will, a condition that I have to meet in order to maintain control of the Melbrock chain. If I don't meet it, the company gets sold to a consortium of investors who will liquidate everything my family built over 3 generations. Her voice cracked. I turn 25 in 6 weeks, and the condition is that I have to be married before my 25th birthday. Ryan stared at her. That's archaic. It's controlling and manipulative even from beyond the grave, Celeste agreed bitterly. My father never approved of my choices, never thought I was ready to run the company alone. This was his way of forcing me to settle down, as he put it, to find someone who would stabilize me. She laughed again, that same hollow sound. But I don't have time for a real relationship. I don't have time for courtship and dating and all the things normal people do. I have 6 weeks. And you want. Ryan already knew where this was going, but he couldn't quite believe it. Celeste met his eyes directly. I want to hire you to marry me. A business arrangement. You marry me before my birthday, we stay married for 1 year as required by the will, and then we divorce amicably. In exchange, I'll pay you $10 billion. The number hung in the air between them like a physical thing. 10 billion. Ryan had been celebrating a $100,000 trading account just minutes ago. 10 billion was more money than he could conceptualize. It was generational wealth. It was never having to work again money. It was freedom in its purest financial form. He should have been tempted. Any rational person would be tempted. No, he said quietly. Celeste blinked. I'm sorry. No, I can't do that. She stepped forward, confusion and desperation mixing on her face. Did you hear the amount? $10 billion, Ryan. That's not a typo. 10 billion. You would never have to push that cleaning cart again. You could do anything you wanted for the rest of your life. I heard you, Ryan said, his voice steady. And my answer is no. Why? The word came out almost as a plea. Why would you possibly say no to that kind of money? Ryan looked at her for a long moment. In her eyes, he saw what he'd seen in his own mirror for years after his wife died. A desperate person willing to do anything to avoid facing the real pain underneath. Because I'm not for sale, Ms. Davenport. My life, my choices, my name, they're not commodities. And because whatever you're running from by trying to buy a husband, you're not going to solve it this way. You don't know anything about me, Celeste said, her voice rising with emotion. I know enough, Ryan replied gently. I know you're standing in a hotel suite alone at midnight, offering a stranger $10 billion because you don't have anyone else to ask. I know your father tried to control your life from beyond the grave, and instead of fighting that, you're perpetuating it by trying to turn a marriage, something that should be sacred, into a business transaction. And I know that no amount of money is worth betraying the memory of my wife by turning our marriage into a mockery. The words hit Celeste like a physical blow. She stepped back, her eyes filling with tears. I don't have a choice. If I don't do this, I lose everything. Everything my family built. Everything my father worked for. Despite his flaws, hundreds of employees will lose their jobs. The Melbrock name will disappear. Then fight it, Ryan said. Get lawyers, challenge the will, find another way, but don't do this. Don't reduce yourself to buying someone's life because it's easier than facing the real problem. You think I haven't tried? Celeste's voice broke. I've had 5 different law firms review the will. It's airtight. My father was thorough. He knew exactly what he was doing. And the timeline doesn't allow for lengthy court battles. I have 6 weeks, Ryan. 6 weeks to find a solution or I lose everything. Ryan felt a flicker of sympathy, but his resolve didn't waver. I'm sorry for your situation. I really am. But I can't be your solution. I won't be. He moved toward the door, but Celeste's voice stopped him. 20 billion. Ryan turned back slowly. Excuse me? $20 billion. Her voice was desperate now, all pretense of composure gone. I'll double the offer. 20 billion for 1 year of your life. That's almost $60 million per day, Ryan. Think about it. Really think about it. For a moment, Ryan did think about it. $20 billion. He could set up his son for life, could fund scholarships, build hospitals, change countless lives. He could pursue his trading career with zero financial pressure. He could buy the motorcycle shop he'd always dreamed of owning. He could do so much good with that money, but at what cost? Ms. Davenport, he said quietly. I grew up poor, really poor. The kind of poor where you wear the same pair of shoes until your toes break through the front, where you learn to stretch a pound of ground beef across a week's worth of meals, where you understand that some bills just won't get paid this month, and you hope the power company is feeling generous. He paused. I joined the military at 18 because it guaranteed 3 meals a day and a paycheck. I've worked jobs that destroyed my body and crushed my spirit. I know what poverty feels like from the inside. He gestured around the opulent suite. And I've also worked in places like this for years. I've cleaned the rooms of people who have more money than they could spend in 10 lifetimes. I've seen what that kind of wealth does to people. The isolation, the paranoia, the inability to trust anyone because you never know if they want you or your money. I've watched marriages fall apart, watched children grow up entitled and empty, watched people surround themselves with things instead of connections. Ryan stepped closer to Celeste. So yes, I know exactly what $20 billion represents, and I know that accepting it would make me exactly what you're treating me as, a commodity, a solution to a problem, a means to an end. I'd be selling the most fundamental part of who I am, and no amount of money is worth that price. Celeste stared at him, tears now openly streaming down her face. Then what am I supposed to do? I don't know, Ryan admitted, but I know that the answer isn't buying someone. And I know that if your father's love was conditional on you following his rules even after his death, then maybe losing his company isn't the tragedy you think it is. Maybe it's freedom. The words hung between them in the silence. Ryan could see them landing, see them hitting something deep inside Celeste that she'd been avoiding. Her legs seemed to give out and she sank onto the white leather couch, her head in her hands. I don't know how to be free, she whispered. I've never been free. First it was my father's expectations, then my ex-husband's demands, and now this will. I don't even know who I am without someone telling me who I should be. Ryan surprised himself by sitting in the chair across from her. Every professional boundary told him to leave, but something deeper kept him there. Then maybe that's what you should be figuring out. Not how to satisfy one more demand, but who Celeste Davenport actually is when nobody's watching. She looked up at him, her blue eyes red-rimmed but suddenly focused. And who is Ryan Walker when nobody's watching? It was a fair question. A father, a dreamer, someone who believes that how you make your money matters as much as how much you make. Someone who's spent the last 3 years rebuilding his life from nothing and refuses to compromise on the parts that matter. He paused. And apparently, someone who turns down $20 billion when it conflicts with his values. A ghost of a smile crossed Celeste's face. You're either the most principled man I've ever met or the most foolish. Probably both, Ryan admitted. He glanced at his watch, 12:27 a.m. He was way behind schedule on his rounds. I should get back to work, but Ms. Davenport, Celeste, I hope you find a better solution than the one you offered tonight. You seem like someone who deserves more than a bought marriage. He stood and moved toward the door. His hand was on the handle when Celeste spoke again. Ryan, thank you for being honest with me. I can't remember the last time someone told me no. He nodded and stepped into the hallway, pulling his cleaning cart with him. His phone buzzed again, another notification from his trading platform, but he ignored it, his mind spinning with the surreal conversation he'd just had. $10 billion, $20 billion, numbers so large they didn't feel real, and he'd said no. As Ryan continued his rounds cleaning bathrooms and vacuuming carpets in the empty hotel, he felt something unexpected. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from making a hard choice that aligns with your values. He'd probably just turned down more money than he'd see in 100 lifetimes, and he didn't regret it for a second. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. His mind kept returning to Celeste's face, to the desperation and loneliness he'd seen there. She wasn't just a billionaire with a problem. She was a person trapped in a cage made of expectations and control. He knew that feeling. He'd felt it after his wife died, when everyone expected him to move on and get back out there on their timeline, not his. At 6 a.m., as his shift ended and the morning crew arrived, Ryan changed out of his uniform in the staff locker room. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, but as he walked out to the parking lot, his pride and joy awaited. A blue Harley-Davidson motorcycle that he'd restored himself. It had been a rusted heap when he'd bought it for $800 3 years ago, but now it purred like a dream. He straddled the bike and started the engine, the familiar rumble grounding him. This was real. This machine restored by his own hands. The sunrise painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The exhaustion in his muscles from an honest night's work. This was his life, and it had value that couldn't be measured in dollars. As he pulled out of the parking lot, Ryan didn't see Celeste watching him from her penthouse window, still awake, still processing their conversation. He didn't see the way she'd noticed the confidence in his walk, the care he'd taken with his equipment, the dignity he carried despite pushing a cleaning cart. And he didn't see the way she'd picked up her phone and made a call to her head of security, requesting a full background check on Ryan Walker, not because she still wanted to buy him, but because she wanted to understand him. Because in a world where everyone had a price, she'd finally met someone who didn't, and it had shaken her to her core. The next few days passed uneventfully for Ryan. He worked his shifts, studied trading charts during his downtime, and began the paperwork process with BlackRock. The contract was real, and he'd start trading their capital in 2 weeks. It felt like vindication for every doubt he'd faced, every person who'd looked at his uniform and assumed that was all he'd ever be. On Thursday night, as he arrived for his shift, the head of housekeeping called him into her office. "Ryan, I need you to cover the penthouse floor exclusively this week," Martha said, her weathered face serious. Apparently, Ms. Davenport specifically requested you. She said you do exceptional work." Ryan's stomach dropped. "Did she say anything else?" Martha shook her head. "Just that. Why? Is there a problem?" "No," Ryan said quickly. "No problem. I'll take care of it." But as he rode the elevator up to the penthouse floor that night, his nerves were on edge. What was Celeste playing at? He'd made his position clear. Had she decided to fire him? To make his work life difficult because he'd refused her offer? When the elevator doors opened, Celeste was standing in the hallway waiting for him. She wore the same royal blue blazer, but this time paired with white jeans and elegant blue heels. Her hair was pulled back in a professional ponytail, and her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Walker," she said formally, "thank you for coming. I was hoping we could talk." "I thought I made my position clear," Ryan said, not moving his cart from the elevator. "You did." Celeste's voice was measured, careful. "And I'm not here to make another offer. I'm here to apologize." That caught Ryan off guard. "Apologize? For treating you like a commodity, for assuming that everyone has a price, for being so desperate that I didn't consider how insulting my offer was, not just to you, but to both of us." She took a breath. "You were right about everything you said. I was running from my problems instead of facing them, and I was perpetuating exactly the kind of control my father tried to exert over me." Ryan stepped out of the elevator, studying her face. The desperation was gone, replaced by something that looked like determination. "What changed?" "You did," Celeste said simply. "Or rather, what you said. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About being free. About figuring out who I am without someone else's expectations. So I fired my lawyers." "You what?" "I fired them. All of them. The ones who kept telling me the will was unbreakable. Then I hired one lawyer, just one, who specializes in challenging posthumous control provisions. And you know what? She found 3 potential legal challenges that my army of corporate lawyers missed because they weren't actually trying to challenge the will. They were trying to work within it." Ryan felt a smile tug at his lips. "That's great." "It's terrifying," Celeste corrected, but she was smiling too. "Because it means going to war with my father's estate, which means going to war with the board of directors and everyone who benefits from the current arrangement. It means months of legal battles and possibly losing anyway. But at least I'm fighting. At least I'm not buying my way out of a problem I should be confronting." She stepped closer to him. "I wanted to thank you, Ryan, for refusing my offer, for reminding me that there are still people in the world who value integrity over money, for seeing me as a person, not as a desperate billionaire with a checkbook." "You're welcome," Ryan said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I think you're going to win your legal battles. You seem like someone who doesn't lose once you decide to actually fight." Celeste laughed. A genuine laugh this time, not the hollow sound from their first conversation. "I hope you're right." She glanced at his cleaning cart. "I should let you get to work. I just wanted to clear the air." "Consider it cleared," Ryan said. But as he started to push his cart past her, Celeste spoke again. "Ryan, can I ask you one more question? Not as a potential business arrangement, but just as one person to another?" He turned back. "Sure. How did you do it? How did you rebuild your life after losing everything? Because that's what I'm facing now, the real possibility of losing everything. And I don't know if I have what it takes." Ryan thought about his answer carefully. "After my wife died, I thought my life was over. I was drowning in grief and bills and responsibilities I didn't know how to handle alone. For months, I just went through the motions, doing what needed to be done because I had people depending on me. But then one day, I realized something. I was still here, still breathing, still capable of making choices. The circumstances had broken me, but they hadn't destroyed the fundamental part of who I was. He met her eyes. Losing everything material doesn't mean losing everything that matters. Your company is important. I understand that. But it's not who you are. You're whoever you decide to be in the face of this challenge. And from what I've seen tonight, you're deciding to be someone brave enough to fight, rather than someone desperate enough to buy a solution. That's pretty impressive. Celeste's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she was smiling. Thank you. That actually helps more than you know. This time when Ryan moved to continue his work, she didn't stop him. But as he cleaned the hallways and suites, he found himself thinking about their conversation, about courage and loss and rebuilding, about the strange connection that had formed between two people from completely different worlds over the course of 2 midnight conversations. At 2 a.m., as he was finishing the last suite, his phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made him answer. Ryan Walker? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. Speaking. This is Jennifer Chen from BlackRock Capital Management. I'm calling to inform you that due to an administrative review, we need to delay your start date by 30 days. This is standard procedure and doesn't reflect on your evaluation results. You're still approved for the program. Ryan's heart sank. 30 days. That meant 30 more days of working 2 jobs, of exhausting himself to make ends meet, of living on the edge of financial collapse. I understand, he said, keeping his voice steady. Thank you for letting me know. After she hung up, Ryan sat on the edge of the bathtub in the empty suite, suddenly feeling the weight of every choice he'd made. He'd turned down $20 billion. He had a breakthrough opportunity delayed. He was 30 days away from stability, but 30 days might as well be 30 years when you're living paycheck to paycheck. Had he made the right choice? He thought about Celeste's offer again. With that money, he wouldn't be sitting here worrying about 30 days. He wouldn't be worrying about anything ever again. But then he thought about the look in her eyes when she'd thanked him tonight, the way she'd said he'd changed something in her, the fact that she was fighting now instead of hiding behind her checkbook. Some things, he realized, were worth more than security. Sometimes being the person you wanted to be was worth the risk of staying exactly where you were. Ryan stood up, finished his work, and clocked out at 6 a.m. As he walked to his motorcycle, the morning sun was just breaking over the horizon. Another day, another dollar, another choice to be proud of. He started the Harley and pulled out of the parking lot, not knowing that Celeste was watching again from her window, not knowing that she'd made a decision of her own, not about buying a husband, but about what kind of person she wanted to become, not knowing that their story was just beginning. The following week brought an unexpected rhythm to Ryan's nights at the Melbrook Hotel. Celeste had taken to working late in her penthouse suite, and several times he'd encountered her in the hallways, always impeccably dressed in her signature royal blue blazer and varying combinations of jeans or shorts, always professional, but increasingly warm in their brief exchanges. On Tuesday night, as Ryan was sanitizing the hallway fixtures, Celeste emerged from her suite carrying a leather portfolio. Late night? Ryan asked, glancing at his watch. It was 1:30 a.m. Every night lately, Celeste admitted. Legal warfare doesn't keep business hours. She held up the portfolio. I'm meeting with the new lawyer first thing in the morning. We think we found a procedural error in how the will was executed. It's a long shot, but it's something. That's great, I hope it works out. Me too. She paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Ryan, can I ask you something? And please feel free to tell me if I'm overstepping. Go ahead. The other night you mentioned you were a father, but I've never seen you with your child during the day shifts. Is everything okay? The question hit a tender spot. Ryan set down his spray bottle and faced her. My son, he's with my late wife's parents. They have custody. Oh. Celeste's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have asked. It's okay. Ryan surprised himself by continuing. After my wife died, I fell apart, lost my job, couldn't pay rent, ended up staying in shelters with my son. When my in-laws offered to take him temporarily until I got back on my feet, I thought it was the right choice. Thought I was being a good father by giving him stability. He looked away. That was 3 years ago. They've been fighting me for permanent custody ever since, claiming I'm not fit because of my financial situation. That's horrible, Celeste said quietly. It is what it is. I see him every other weekend. I send every dollar I can spare for his care. And I'm working on building something better so I can petition for custody again. He managed a weak smile. That's part of why I work this shift. It pays better. And the second income from my trading is starting to build. One day I'll be stable enough that the courts will see I can provide for him properly. Celeste was quiet for a moment, and Ryan worried he'd overshared. But when she spoke, her voice carried a new depth of understanding. So when I offered you all that money, I was essentially asking you to lie about who you were for a year, which could have impacted your custody case. I didn't even think about that angle, Ryan admitted. I just knew I couldn't do it. But you're right. If it came out that I'd entered a fake marriage for money, my in-laws' lawyers would have had a field day. God, Celeste breathed. I'm even more sorry now. I really didn't consider the complexities of your life. I just saw a solution to my problem. Well, you're not that person anymore, Ryan said gently. You're the person fighting her own battles now. That's what matters. She smiled at him, and in that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't attraction exactly, though Ryan would have been lying if he said he didn't notice how beautiful she was, but recognition. Two people who'd been knocked down by life and were clawing their way back up, just in very different ways. Would you like some coffee? Celeste asked suddenly. I have an excellent espresso machine in my suite, and I could use the company. No obligations, no weird offers. Just coffee and conversation with someone who tells the truth. Every logical part of Ryan's brain screamed that this was a bad idea. Accepting hospitality from the owner of the company. Being alone with her in her suite again. Crossing professional boundaries. But the lonely part of him, the part that had been carrying his burdens alone for 3 years, said yes. Coffee sounds good, he said. They sat in her suite, in the comfortable chairs by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights spread out below them like a universe of possibilities. Celeste made them espresso with practiced precision, and they talked about everything except money and problems and obligations. They talked about music. Celeste confessed she'd been a classical piano student as a child, forced into it by her father, and now she couldn't hear Chopin without feeling anxious. Ryan told her about his love for blues music, how he'd spent countless nights listening to B.B. King and Muddy Waters while restoring his motorcycle, how the music made him feel connected to something larger than his immediate struggles. Do you like when there's music playing at the beginning of videos? Celeste asked suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere. That's a random question, Ryan said with a laugh. But yeah, I guess so. Good music can set the tone for everything. Why? Just curious about people's preferences, she said, smiling mysteriously. They talked about books. Celeste surprised him by revealing that her favorite book was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's about following your personal legend, she explained. About having the courage to pursue your dreams even when the world tells you to be practical. I read it every year, and every year I realize I'm not actually living by its message. I'm living by everyone else's expectations of what I should do. But you're changing that now, Ryan pointed out. Trying to, she corrected. The trying is the hard part. Ryan shared that his favorite book was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's about finding purpose even in the worst circumstances. About choosing your attitude when you can't choose your circumstances. It got me through some dark nights after my wife died. I should read it, Celeste said softly. They talked about dreams too. Ryan told her about his plans for trading, about the BlackRock opportunity, about his goal to eventually open a motorcycle restoration shop where he could mentor young people and teach them that working with your hands wasn't something to be ashamed of. Celeste talked about wanting to revolutionize the hotel industry, to create spaces that felt like homes rather than impersonal rooms. But more than that, she admitted, I want to prove that I can run this company better than my father did, that his way, ruling through fear and control, wasn't the only way or even the best way. Hello, my friend, how was your day today? Is everything okay? Celeste asked suddenly, her voice softening with genuine concern. The question, simple as it was, hit Ryan with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had asked him that? Really asked, wanting to know the answer, not just making conversation. You know what? He said after a moment. Today was actually pretty good. I found out my son's basketball team won their championship. My ex-in-laws sent me a photo of him holding the trophy, and he was grinning like he'd won the lottery. That's a good day in my book. That's wonderful, Celeste said, and her smile was radiant. You must be so proud. I am. I just wish I could have been there to see it in person. You will be, Celeste said with certainty. You're building something, Ryan. I can see it. You're the kind of person who doesn't quit, even when things are hard. Your son is going to see that eventually. He's going to understand what you sacrificed and why. They talked until 4:30 a.m., when Ryan realized with a jolt that he'd completely abandoned his cleaning duties for hours. "Oh God, I'm going to get fired," he said, jumping up. "You're not getting fired," Celeste assured him. "I'll tell Martha I asked you to help me with something," which is technically true. "You helped me remember what actual human connection feels like." Ryan looked at her, this woman who just days ago had tried to buy him, who now sat in comfortable clothes with no makeup, looking more real and more beautiful than any billionaire had a right to look. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "I needed this more than I realized." "Me too," Celeste admitted. "Same time next week?" It was a dangerous proposition. They both knew it. But Ryan found himself nodding anyway. Same time next week. As he rushed through his remaining cleaning tasks, Ryan couldn't stop smiling. He felt lighter somehow, as if sharing his burdens with someone, really sharing them, not just carrying them alone, had redistributed the weight. He didn't notice the security camera in the hallway, or the fact that the building's head of security had already flagged the footage of Ryan spending 3 hours in the owner's suite to the board of directors. He didn't know that by sharing coffee and conversation, he'd just triggered a chain of events that would force both of them to confront not just their pasts, but their futures. And he didn't know that Celeste, lying awake in her bed after he'd left, had realized something terrifying and wonderful. She was falling for the one man who'd refused her money, the one man who'd seen her not as a means to an end, but as a person worth knowing. The next morning, Ryan's phone rang just as he was climbing onto his Harley after his shift. The caller ID showed Mel Brock Corporate. "Mr. Walker, this is Patricia Chen from Human Resources. We need you to come in for a meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. regarding your employment. Please don't be late." His stomach dropped. "Can you tell me what this is about?" "We'll discuss everything at the meeting. Second floor, conference room B." She hung up before he could ask anything else. Ryan sat on his motorcycle, the morning sun suddenly feeling less warm. This was it. Someone had seen him in Celeste's suite. He was going to get fired for fraternizing with the owner, or for neglecting his duties, or for some other violation he hadn't even considered. The BlackRock opportunity wouldn't start for another 3 weeks. He couldn't afford to lose this job. He couldn't afford another setback in his custody battle. He thought about calling Celeste, but what would he say? She'd said she'd cover for him, but against corporate HR policies? Against whatever evidence they had? Ryan started his motorcycle and headed home, his mind racing through every possible scenario, each one worse than the last. The peaceful glow from his night of conversation with Celeste was rapidly fading, replaced by the cold reality of his situation. He rode for 20 minutes before pulling into a small diner that had become his regular spot after night shifts. Eddie's served the kind of honest, no-frills breakfast that reminded him of his grandmother's cooking. He needed coffee and time to think. The waitress, Maria, knew him by name. "The usual, Ryan? Please. And keep the coffee coming." While he waited, Ryan pulled out his phone and looked at the photo his former in-laws had sent. His son, Marcus, holding that basketball trophy, his smile so wide it seemed to split his face. The boy looked so much like his mother it hurt. "I'm trying, buddy," Ryan whispered to the photo. "I'm really trying." His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Celeste. Martha gave me your number. I heard about the HR meeting. I'm handling it. Don't worry." Ryan stared at the message. Before he could respond, another text came. "And before you get all proud, this isn't about you. The board is using you to get to me. They want to prove I'm not fit to run the company. I won't let them hurt innocent people to score points against me." Ryan typed back, "Thank you, but I can handle myself." "I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. Not when this is really about me. See you at 2 p.m. I'll be in that meeting." Maria brought his breakfast, and Ryan ate mechanically, his mind spinning. The situation was more complicated than he'd realized. He wasn't just a custodian who'd broken protocol. He was a pawn in a much larger game. After finishing his meal, Ryan rode home to his small studio apartment. The place was barely 400 square feet, with a Murphy bed, a kitchenette with a hot plate and mini fridge, and a tiny bathroom. But it was clean, paid for, and his. He set 3 alarms. No way he was being late, and collapsed onto his bed. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Celeste, the way she'd looked at him like he was something rare and valuable. He couldn't afford to care about her, not as anything more than a friendly acquaintance. She was a billionaire fighting for her empire, And he was a custodian fighting for his next paycheck. They existed in different universes that had briefly intersected, that's all. But the memory of her laugh, genuine and unguarded, kept playing in his mind. At 1:45 p.m., Ryan walked into the Melbrook corporate headquarters wearing his only suit, a navy blue affair he'd bought from a thrift store for his wife's funeral 3 years ago. It was slightly too big in the shoulders and too short in the legs, but it was clean and pressed. The corporate building was separate from the hotel, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. Ryan had never been inside before. His world was service elevators and basement corridors, not marble lobbies and executive suites. The elevator to the second floor felt longer than it should have. When the doors opened, Ryan followed the signs to Conference Room B. Outside, he found Celeste waiting. She wore a severe black pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, every inch the corporate executive. But when she saw him, her expression softened. "Ready?" she asked. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really, but I want you to know, whatever happens in there, I've got your back. These people think they can intimidate me by going after people in my life. They're about to learn they picked the wrong person to mess with." The door opened before Ryan could respond, and a stern-looking woman gestured them inside. "Ms. Davenport, Mr. Walker, please sit." The conference room was designed to intimidate. Massive mahogany table, leather chairs, walls lined with portraits of previous Melbrook CEOs, all men. At the head sat 3 people: Patricia Chen from HR, Gerald Hoffman from the board, and Linda Morrison, Chief Legal Counsel. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Walker," Gerald said. "It's come to our attention that you spent approximately 3.5 hours in Ms. Davenport's private suite this morning, during hours when you should have been performing your duties. Can you explain this?" Before Ryan could answer, Celeste spoke up. "I can explain it. I asked Mr. Walker to help me with a personal matter. As the owner of this company, I believe I'm entitled to request assistance from my employees." "The nature of this personal matter?" Linda Morrison asked. "That's private," Celeste said coolly. "With all due respect, your personal life becomes company business when it occurs on company property, during company time," Gerald said. "We have a duty to protect the integrity of Melbrook hotels." "The integrity?" Celeste's voice was ice. "Or your control over the board? Let's be honest, Gerald. You're looking for ammunition to use in the upcoming will challenge. You're hoping to paint me as unstable or inappropriate so you can justify removing me from leadership." The room went silent. Patricia looked uncomfortable. Linda's pen stopped moving. Gerald's face reddened. "That's a serious accusation," he said carefully. "And this is a serious invasion of privacy," Celeste countered. "You've had Mr. Walker followed. You've reviewed security footage. You've constructed a narrative to embarrass me. But here's what you didn't count on. We have nothing to hide because nothing inappropriate happened." She turned to Ryan. "Please tell them exactly what we did last night." Ryan spoke clearly and calmly. "Miss Davenport invited me for coffee. We sat in her living room in plain view and we talked. About books, about music, about life, for approximately 3.5 hours. Then I finished my shift duties. That's everything that happened." "You neglected your cleaning responsibilities for 3.5 hours," Patricia pointed out. "That's a violation of your employment contract." "I completed all essential cleaning tasks before my shift ended," Ryan replied. "The quality of my work has never been questioned in 3 years. One variance in routine at the request of the owner hardly seems like grounds for termination." "No one said anything about termination," Gerald said smoothly. "We're simply trying to understand the situation." "Then let me help you understand," Celeste said, standing up. The movement was so commanding that everyone's attention snapped to her. "Mr. Walker is one of the most conscientious employees in this company. He works nights because it pays better. He sends every extra dollar to support his son. He's earned a trading opportunity with BlackRock Capital, something requiring extraordinary skill, while working full-time in custodial services. And yes, I asked him for coffee because I wanted to talk to someone who treats me like a human being instead of a balance sheet." She leaned forward. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop this investigation. You're going to leave Mr. Walker alone. And you're going to understand that I will run this company my way, not my father's way, and certainly not according to the board's desire to control me through intimidation." "Ms. Davenport," Linda began. "I'm not finished," Celeste cut her off. "I know what you're thinking, that I'm young, emotional, not fit for this position, that my father was right to try to control me from beyond the grave. But here's what you don't know. I've spent the last week with the best trust and estate attorney in the state. She's found multiple legal challenges to my father's will, challenges that could invalidate the entire marriage requirement. So you can either work with me as I fight this battle, or work against me and find yourselves looking for new positions when I win." The silence was absolute. Gerald's expression had gone from condescending to calculating. Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear. Linda Morrison seemed almost impressed. "Are you threatening the board?" Gerald asked carefully. "I'm clarifying the situation," Celeste replied. "My father stacked this board with his cronies, people who benefited from his authoritarian leadership. But times change. Leadership styles evolve. And if you can't adapt to a CEO who values humanity over hierarchy, then perhaps it's time for you to consider retirement." Ryan watched with a mixture of awe and concern. Celeste was magnificent, strong, clear, unafraid, but she was also potentially committing career suicide by directly challenging the board. Gerald stood up slowly. "I think we've heard enough. Mr. Walker, you're free to go. Ms. Davenport, the board will be scheduling an emergency meeting to discuss your clarifications." "You do that," Celeste said. "Mr. Walker?" Ryan stood and followed her out of the conference room, his mind reeling. As soon as they were in the hallway, away from listening ears, he turned to her. "That was either brilliant or suicidal," he said. "Please tell me you actually have those legal challenges." Celeste's fierce expression cracked into a grin. "Oh, I have them. They're solid, too. My new lawyer is a shark. She found procedural errors in how the will was witnessed, potential undue influence claims, and a clause that might violate public policy. It's going to be a fight, but it's a fight I can win." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Ryan asked. "Why let me worry all day?" Her grin faded. "Because I wanted you to have deniability. If they asked you about my legal strategy, I wanted you to honestly say you didn't know. I won't let you get caught in the crossfire of my war." "I'm already in the crossfire," Ryan pointed out. "They had me followed, Celeste. They investigated my entire life. I'm already involved whether you wanted me to be or not." She looked stricken. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to touch you." "I know, but it has." Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I appreciate you defending me in there, really. But I need to be clear about something. I can't be used as a pawn in your battle with the board. I have my own battles to fight. Custody of my son, building my trading career, getting my life stable. I can't afford to be collateral damage in a corporate war." "You're right," Celeste said quietly. "You're absolutely right. I got caught up in making a stand and I didn't consider how it would affect you. I'll be more careful." They stood in the hallway, the weight of complicated circumstances settling between them. Ryan knew he should walk away, should maintain professional distance, should protect himself and his interests. But when he looked at Celeste, he saw the same thing he'd seen that first night. Someone fighting to figure out who they were without other people's expectations. Someone trying to be brave in the face of overwhelming pressure. Someone who, for better or worse, had seen him as more than just a custodian with a cleaning cart. "I should go," he said finally. "I need to sleep before my shift tonight." "Ryan?" Celeste's voice stopped him. "Thank you for having coffee with me, for talking to me like I'm a person, for existing, I guess. You've changed something in me these past few days. I don't know what happens next, but I want you to know that." Ryan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, feeling her eyes on his back until the doors closed between them. That night, Ryan returned to work at his usual time, but everything felt different. Word had spread through the staff about the HR meeting. Some people looked at him with curiosity, others with judgment, a few with something that might have been respect. Martha, his supervisor, pulled him aside before his shift started. "I don't know what's going on between you and Ms. Davenport," she said bluntly, "and I don't want to know. But I've worked here for 22 years and I've never seen anyone stand up to the board the way she did today. The gossip is spreading like wildfire. You've made waves, Ryan." "I didn't mean to," he said honestly. "Maybe not. But sometimes waves come whether we mean them to or not." Martha's stern expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I think you're a good man, and I think Ms. Davenport could use more good people in her corner. Just be careful. These are dangerous waters you're swimming in." "I know. Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're a custodian who just got involved in a billion-dollar corporate battle. That's not a position most people survive." She was right, of course. Ryan knew it. But what was he supposed to do? Walk away from someone who needed a friend? Pretend the connection he felt with Celeste didn't exist? Hide from complications because they might be inconvenient? He'd spent 3 years playing it safe. 3 years taking no risks, making no waves, keeping his head down. And where had it gotten him? Still separated from his son. Still barely scraping by. Still alone. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe. As Ryan pushed his cleaning cart down the familiar hallways that night, his phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. "I know you're probably sick of me, but there's something I need to tell you. Can we talk tomorrow? During daylight hours this time? Somewhere public. Just coffee, no drama." Ryan smiled despite himself and typed back, "Eddie's Diner, 10 a.m. You're buying." Her response came immediately. "Deal. Thank you for not giving up on me." Ryan didn't respond to that because what could he say? That he wasn't sure he could give up on her even if he wanted to? That in less than a week she'd become the most interesting person in his otherwise monotonous life? That he looked forward to seeing her with an intensity that scared him? No. Some things were better left unsaid. As the night progressed, Ryan found his thoughts drifting back to Celeste again and again, to the way she'd stood up to the board with such fierce conviction, to the vulnerability she'd shown him in their late-night conversations, to the growing sense that they were two people on the edge of something neither of them fully understood. At 3:00 a.m. he was cleaning one of the executive suites when he noticed a folder left on the desk. Normally, he wouldn't have looked. Guest privacy was paramount, but the header caught his eye. Davenport Estate Challenge, confidential. He shouldn't read it. He absolutely shouldn't read it. But curiosity won out. He opened the folder and scanned the first page. It was a legal memo outlining Celeste's strategy. The will had been executed without proper witness procedures. There was evidence of undue influence by board members, and the marriage requirement violated public policy. It was brilliant, aggressive, risky, but brilliant. And if it worked, Celeste wouldn't need to marry anyone. She'd be free to run her company on her own terms. Ryan carefully closed the folder and placed it back exactly where he'd found it. His hands were shaking slightly. If Celeste won this battle, their relationship would shift. She wouldn't be the desperate woman who'd offered him billions. She'd be a CEO who'd fought for and won her independence. And he'd be, what? Still a custodian. Still fighting for custody of his son. Still building toward a trading career that might or might not pan out. The gulf between them would be as wide as ever, maybe wider. Ryan finished his shift in a contemplative mood. As he rode his Harley home in the pre-dawn darkness, he thought about fate and timing, and the strange ways that lives intersect. When he finally fell into bed at 7 a.m., Ryan dreamed of blue eyes and fierce determination, and a woman who'd somehow become important to him in the span of a week. And in her penthouse suite, Celeste lay awake, thinking about a man who'd refused $20 billion because it conflicted with his values. Neither of them knew that the next day's conversation would change everything again. Neither of them knew that the board was planning a counterattack that would force them both to make impossible choices. And neither of them knew that buried in both their pasts was a connection that had been there all along, waiting to be discovered. The next morning at Eddie's Diner, Ryan arrived early. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with everything that had happened. The board meeting, Celeste's fierce defense of him, the growing sense that his life was spinning into something he couldn't control. Celeste walked in at exactly 10 a.m., but she looked different. No power suit today. Instead, she wore simple jeans, a white t-shirt, and a blue cardigan. Her hair was down, and she wore minimal makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more real. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You said it was important." Maria brought coffee without asking, and Celeste wrapped her hands around the mug like it could anchor her. "I need to tell you something. Something I discovered last night when I couldn't sleep and started going through old family photos." Ryan waited, sensing this was going to change everything. "Do you remember where you grew up?" Celeste asked. "A small town called Riverside, about 2 hours north of here." "Why?" Celeste pulled out her phone and showed him a photo, old, faded, clearly scanned from a physical picture. It showed 2 children, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing next to a blue motorcycle. A little blonde girl in a yellow dress and a dark-haired boy with a huge grin. Ryan's breath caught. He recognized that motorcycle. He recognized that boy. "That's my father's motorcycle," Celeste said quietly. "The one he taught me to ride on when I was little. The one that's now sitting in your garage, restored in blue. How do you—" Ryan couldn't finish the question. "That boy is you, Ryan, and that little girl is me. We were neighbors in Riverside for 3 years. Your family lived next door to my family's summer house. We played together every summer until I was 8, and my father sold the property. I didn't remember until I saw this photo last night in a box my mother had saved." Ryan stared at the photo, memories flooding back. The summer house with the big porch, the blonde girl who'd wanted to learn everything about motorcycles, the way she'd followed him around asking endless questions, the day her father had let them both sit on the bike pretending to ride it together. Celeste, he whispered, little Celeste who asked a million questions, and you always answered every one, she said, smiling through tears. You were so patient with me. You taught me about engines and gears. You let me help you wash your dad's motorcycle. You were my first friend who didn't care that my father was rich or that I lived in a mansion the rest of the year. The motorcycle, Ryan said, the pieces falling into place. When your father sold the summer house, he gave it to my dad, said he didn't have room for it anymore. My dad spent years restoring it, and when he died, he left it to me. I finished the restoration work as a way to honor him. So you've been taking care of my father's motorcycle all this time, Celeste said. The bike I learned to love engines on. The bike that made me feel free for the first time in my life. And I offered you billions of dollars without knowing that you'd already given me something priceless when we were children. Acceptance. They sat in silence, both processing the impossibility and perfection of it all. Two people whose lives had intersected as children, separated for 20 years, brought back together by fate and desperation, and a late-night encounter in a hotel corridor. I need to tell you something else, Celeste said. The board had an emergency meeting last night. They've accelerated their timeline. They're demanding I either marry by my 25th birthday, which is in 5 weeks, or they're moving forward with selling the company. My lawyer thinks we can win the legal challenge, but not in 5 weeks. We'd need at least 6 months. So you're out of time, Ryan said. I'm out of time, Celeste confirmed. She looked at him directly. And I'm not going to ask you to marry me again. I learned my lesson, but I wanted you to know what's happening. I wanted you to understand that when I lose this company, it's okay, because you taught me something more important, that there are things worth more than winning, like integrity, like being true to yourself, like friendship that transcends decades and circumstances. Ryan felt something shift inside him. This woman across from him wasn't a desperate billionaire anymore. She was the little girl who'd sat on a motorcycle seat too big for her, dreaming of freedom. She was someone who'd been controlled her whole life and was finally learning to fight for herself. She was someone who'd seen him not as a commodity, but as a person, and she was someone he was falling in love with. What if there was another way? Ryan said slowly. Celeste looked up sharply. What do you mean? What if we did get married? But not as a transaction, not as a fake arrangement. What if we did it as two people who've known each other longer than either of us remembered? Two people who are both fighting for something important? Two people who might actually want to see where this could go. Ryan, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He leaned forward. Look, I'm not saying I'm in love with you. We've known each other for a week. But I feel something here, Celeste. Something real. And maybe that's worth taking a chance on. Maybe we get married, you keep your company, and we see if what we're feeling is real or just the intensity of the situation. If it's real, we stay married. If it's not, we divorce after a year just like you originally planned. But at least we're going into it honestly. That's insane, Celeste whispered. Probably, Ryan agreed. But you know what? I've been playing it safe for 3 years. Being careful, being responsible, never taking risks. And where has it gotten me? Still separated from my son? Still struggling? Still alone? Maybe it's time I did something insane. Before we go any further, I want to take a moment to wish each and every one of you watching a very Merry Christmas. May God bless you and protect you and your families now and always. This blessing comes straight from my heart, from me, the creator of this channel, to you. Thank you for being here and sharing these stories with me. Celeste was crying openly now. You'd risk everything? Your custody case, your reputation, your future? For me? Not just for you, Ryan said. For us. For the chance that this crazy, impossible situation might actually be the universe giving us a second chance at something we lost when we were kids. For the possibility that sometimes the right choice is the one that looks completely wrong to everyone else. She reached across the table and took his hand. Are you sure? No, Ryan said honestly. But I'm sure enough to try, are you? Celeste laughed through her tears. I offered you $20 billion and you said no. Now you're offering to marry me for nothing but a chance at something real. You're either the most romantic man alive or completely crazy. Like I said before, probably both. They sat there holding hands across the diner table. Two people who'd played together as children and found each other again as adults. Two people who'd both been knocked down by life and were choosing to stand back up together. Two people brave enough to bet on each other when the whole world would tell them they were making a mistake. 3 weeks later, Ryan Walker and Celeste Davenport were married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Martha and Maria as witnesses. Celeste wore her royal blue blazer and white jeans. Ryan wore his thrift store suit and rode them both to the ceremony on his restored blue Harley, the motorcycle that had connected them across 20 years. The board tried to challenge the marriage's validity, but Celeste's lawyer was prepared with documentation proving their childhood connection, making it impossible to argue it was a sham marriage. The will's requirements were technically met, even as the legal challenge to its validity continued. But the most important thing that happened wasn't the legal victory or the preserved company. It was the moment 3 months after their wedding when Ryan's custody lawyer called with news. The judge had reviewed his improved financial situation and stable marriage and had granted him joint custody of Marcus. When Ryan held his son for the first time in his new life, standing in the home he now shared with Celeste, with his trading career flourishing, he looked at his wife and saw her smiling with genuine joy at his happiness. That's when he knew for certain this wasn't a marriage of convenience anymore. It never really had been. They'd both been looking for something they'd lost: freedom, connection, purpose, love. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found it in each other. 6 months after their wedding, Celeste won her legal challenge. The will's marriage requirement was invalidated. She was free to run her company without conditions, free to make her own choices, free to live her own life. And she chose to stay married to the man who'd refused $20 billion but had offered her something infinitely more valuable: a real partnership built on mutual respect, shared history, and the courage to risk everything for something genuine. Ryan continued to trade for BlackRock, eventually opening his dream motorcycle restoration shop where he mentored young people. Celeste revolutionized the hotel industry with her vision of humanity-centered hospitality. Marcus grew up with 2 parents who loved him and each other, learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe in something that seems impossible. And in their garage, a blue Harley-Davidson motorcycle sat like a monument to fate, childhood friendship, second chances, and the truth that some connections transcend time, money, and circumstance. Sometimes the best things in life aren't bought, they're chosen. Thank you for reading this story of dignity, love, and second chances. Now I'd like to ask you, did any of you have an important object in your life? Something that connected you to your past or to someone special? Maybe a piece of jewelry, a vehicle, a book, or something else that carried meaning beyond its material value? Comment here and share your story. I'd love to hear about the objects that mattered most in your journey.